All right, so the AC here broke. It is hot as you know what in here, and you know what's hotter is getting games early. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been playing BioMutant for a number of weeks now. I want to apologize. So many of you kindly wrote in and were like, Matty, are you going to talk about this game? And my plans for pre-launch coverage were happily interrupted when I got this game like 2 weeks early. Y'all know how rare that is. So I embraced the opportunity and dove right in. I've spent about 25, 28 hours with BioMutant, and I'm excited to share some thoughts on this game because it was one of the more conflicting games I've ever reviewed. There were so many things I liked about it and so many things I didn't like about it. But it was conflicting because we have a $60 game that's developed by 20 people. So you understand the scope and scale of this post-apocalyptic kung fu action RPG. But at the same time, I felt like there were moments they could have really narrowed their focus and made something super special. But BioMutant is an extremely unique game, and I think a lot of people are going to love it just by identity alone. So I'm here to share my thoughts based off my experience on the Xbox Series X. It seems like that's the definitive way to play because of the output of resolution that's been sort of creating beef online between the PS5 and the Xbox, so take that as you will. But for those who are looking for more reviews, you're in the right place. Sometimes we get early access, not often, but shout out to the companies who do provide, and be sure to subscribe for more reviews, whether they be nostalgic reviews like our Baldur's Gate one or something like this. Now, as per our tradition, let's start off with the story because it's not told in a way that I think will typically grab you, right? We're very character-driven as RPG players, and what's interesting here is the pull for BioMutant is its world. It's, like I said, a post-apocalyptic kung fu action RPG, but what's interesting is it's a world populated by animals, freaky-looking animals. Like, even when you're creating your character, which this is one of the most detailed character creators I've really ever seen. You can change your breed between 6 different options. There are mutations like your strength, agility, etc. You can adjust your resistances. You can choose your color for your style of fur. You have different classes like the rogue, the deadeye. You have the commando. There's the sci-freak, the sentinel, which I played as, so on and so forth. And so the NPCs are built off of these, and there's a pretty wide diversity of creatures that you'll encounter in this world. The real pull for the story is a sense of discovery. So the way I say that is because when you drop into this game, it's all narrated and it's told to you kind of like a children's book. Like they'll say, go find the Porky Puff and Shmush Magoosh and save the Lollygopper. And you're like, what in the mother of fuck did you just say to me, man? Did he just insult me and my family? Like, what is that? So the game does that a lot with literally no explanation. And you will be confused, at least I was, for some time. And I continue to be confused for most of my playthrough. But as you start to take a closer inspection upon things and stitch it all together, I think there's something that people will really like, because at the backdrop of all of this is a commentary on consumerism and environmentalism. You see, this was a world that was once thriving and now has been destroyed because of the technological and industrial advances of a company called Toxinol Corp. They've devastated the lands, and now they are killing what is called the Tree of Life by dumping into landfills, which is now in the world you are currently exploring. So this Tree of Life was designed to give back into nature, but now it has been tainted. And based off the choices you make in this world, you can either save it or completely destroy it. Now, I am the type of guy who's like, okay, challenge accepted. When a company tells me we got choice and consequence, I go, I'm going to be as evil as humanly possible. I'm going to make the most screwed up choices I can, because I've noticed time in, time out with RPGs in my entire lifetime is they'll always get the choices right for the good guy side of things. But typically when you try to go evil, they'll push you back into the good guy path. So my question is, how evil can I be? Because typically it's good if you can be pretty ruthless in this game. So it's channeled in a number of ways. First off is the core of your choices in the game, which is light aura and dark aura. So as you make different choices in the game, you will get points in these. Think of them like light side points and dark side points in KOTOR, actually. And these points will determine what kind of psi powers that you can access when you level up. So it kind of ties to your scaling and to your build, which I thought was pretty neat because it enforces you doing one thing. And sometimes I emphasize, the world will respond in kind. Oftentimes, however, I'd have people approach me going, you have such a bright, charming spirit. Wow, you're so full of energy. And I'm like, dude, I just murdered a whole village. Like, I maxed out on dark aura. What is happening? So there are moments like that where it feels like the game just is fighting with itself. And once again, that brings up that conflicting nature I'm talking about. But like I said, there are multiple things driving this light and dark side approach. One of them is the tribes within the world. So they've all been split up and have their own belief on how should we handle both the world eaters and the future of the tree of life. And so I decided to sign up with the Jagni, which are these chihuahua-looking, ferocious samurai creatures. I mean, look at this thing. Horrendous. I know. Ugly. I know. But they believe that the entire world needs to be cleansed. They believe the end of the world needs to come. So they want you to get the world eaters on your side, essentially, and have them scorch the planet and have everyone get a fresh restart led by the Jagni. So I went, hey, that sounds evil. Let's do it. And I did it, and it was quite interesting because as I went throughout the world, you would take on outposts, and these outposts sort of served as what you'd be familiar with in a Ubisoft-style open world where you go in there, you wipe out all the enemies, and once you do, you'll see the tribes respond to it and go, oh, how could you do this? And once you take out a number in a region, you'll take on the Sifu, which is the leader of the tribe. And what's kind of interesting is depending on your persuasion and your strength and the skill checks that you can do, there were many outposts I didn't even fight through. I skill checked through the entire thing, which was pretty cool to have, but it felt less like a reward and more like I had just avoided something. You know what I'm talking about? There are RPGs which go, hey, you have skill checks, so you've unlocked this alternate route, or you've unlocked this cool reward, or something different happens. But in this case, it felt like the skill checks were to avoid content. So sometimes I would say, I don't want to really skill check. I just want to play the game. And so there were pretty big leaps in time that my character made as just a primary strength and speed build who was evil, where I was just like, do you really want to do this to like 14 different forts? And they're like, nope, we trust you. And then I kill them afterwards. Like I just have a choice to either kill them or not, and I take them out. So there are a lot of choices you can make, and I felt like the game had a very inconsistent pace of how it responded to you. And that's to be expected. As I said at the top of all this is a development team of 20 people, and they're doing a lot of things with this game. We haven't even touched on the gameplay, which is where you go, wait, what? They're doing all this? So it's very impressive what they've accomplished. And so on one hand, I go, maybe I'll cut them a little slack, but this is a $60 game. You really can't. So that's what I mean about that conflict. And I know a lot of reviewers don't open up on that process, but it's 100% a factor. You're like, well, the team size is doing something spectacular for everything accounted for. Meanwhile, the price tag is one that you typically pay for something of a AAA game. And so ultimately with the story, I was not invested across the board, and there was nothing really dragging me along outside of the choices I can make. What's neat is once you complete the game, you can unlock New Game Plus and try out all different choices. So if you carry over your character with all of its gear and everything, you can see how the other side of things plays out if you'd like to. But overall, I could see a lot of people being drawn to this because it's such a unique game. Especially in its world space, right? It's populated by creatures, it's post-apocalyptic, there's kung fu going on. And let's tap into the gameplay there where you'll see more of what I mean about this game being extremely unique. So like I said, the building of this game when it comes to its character creator is pretty deep, and it carries into leveling up where you can unlock new weapons, you can unlock new psi abilities, there's also mutations. I mean, there's so much that you can scale up for your character, and so it made it where my build felt pretty unique. But this does come at a cost, which is there are so many systems in the game that within the first 2 hours, you'll have a pop-up like every 5 minutes for tutorials. And I started to get that gamer ego where I went, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And just clicking through it, just I know what I'm doing. I got this, because it just started to really pour it on. And I understand why they do it because there's so many systems, they want to explain them to you, but it was pretty crazy. There was like, there's no way I can retain all of this. I think they should have paced out some of their systems better. What are those systems I'm talking about? Well, like I said, there's leveling up, but there's combat in general. So what happens is as you scale up in combat, you can unlock combos. So you can press, like in my case, XXY, and you'll do a super stabby move. And if you do that and alternate different combos, you'll enter a mode called Super Wung Fu. And in the case of Wung Fu, you can do a number of special moves where you can like beat the living life out of someone in midair. You can ground pound. And these are especially useful for the mini bosses you'll encounter all over the world. I mean, a ridiculous amount of them. They are everywhere. But it gives the combat its sort of rhythm where you're switching between psi abilities like dashing to someone or throwing a rock with telekinesis, which was a dark side ability, to using your guns and then getting up close and personal and then switching to Wung Fu. There is this good system there, but it's really the feeling and the flow that fails, and it's because there isn't a lock-on. So I'd be switching targets by accident. The camera would get messed up. I'd be sliding through someone's legs. I'd be backing off. Sometimes I'd be shooting because the balancing didn't feel quite right. So systemically, I think BioMutant's combat's really good, actually. I think there's a lot of variety there to keep you engaged, to keep a good rhythm there. But unfortunately, it's just the balancing of the game and how it allows you to engage with it that falters and stumbles consistently, where at times I was like, oh my God, more combat. Like I'm a little less apt to leap into this now. What did keep me engaged, however, was the crafting and upgrading of armor. So as you explore the world, you're going to loot all sorts of different stashes, and you'll see these Fortnite-like pop-ups. Just ignore them, okay? It's just enough to, emphasize, hey, you found something special. But once you start equipping them and then you start putting add-ons to them, your character starts to look like they're truly in a post-apocalyptic universe. You'll be wearing like a nice leather jacket, but you'll have spiky patches up in the zipper. You'll have like these metallic shoulder plates, and then you'll have one that looks like a lacrosse net over your other shoulder, and then you'll have like a ridiculous bunny hat on. It's so wild and crazy. See what I'm saying as I go on and show you more and more? It is such a weird, wild game that despite all my gripes, I had a good time. I enjoyed building, crafting, tinkering, exploring, and so I ended up liking the game as I continued on. This carries a little bit into the world exploration, where there's a lot of different activities. A lot of them are just area completion. Loot these many items here, mess with this many old world gadgets, where this game has puzzles at the center of it pretty often, where you'll tinker with phones or you'll mess with electrical boxes or anything. Like there was guitars, and you just pretty much match up yellow and white pretty consistently, and they were very simple and actually based it off your intelligence level. So you would have a number of moves you could use, and if your intelligence was higher, they would give you more moves to mess around with in the puzzle. But the other thing here is when you failed, there really wasn't like a penalty. So it was these pseudo skill checks that kind of popped up through the story, and as you can see here in the case of the gameplay. You would also destroy these repurposed environmental waste towers that you could use to put items into the crafting station, into upgrading your equipment. There were side quests laid throughout villages. They would allow you to collect items or fight someone, and those were relatively enjoyable if you wanted to remain engaged with the world for a little bit longer. The complete area objectives, though, seemed to be the real main draw, the main content that was recurring. But what was really special about the open world was the type of mounts you got, and the amount of them you got was pretty crazy. So you could get in a mech, you could get on a horseback, you could ride around in a water jet, and each of them had their own kind of combat loops and bosses center around them. Like I said, this game is wild, where I did like it conceptually in so many ways. For a team of 20, it is truly impressive, and it didn't feel like budget was an issue, but more so jank. And I don't like to overuse that word because it's become super common in the industry, but it really is a rough around the edges title. It does have a lot of things that I like, but there are also, for example, a ton of glitches. So textures not loading in is really common, especially when you're up close to them. I found a bug where every single time I would die in a specific encounter, my game would crash, and it happened to be a pretty difficult encounter, so I had to go through 4 crashes where I would die and have to go to the dashboard, load the game back up, load my game, run into the combat scenario. And this was especially frustrating the first time it happened because I lost progress, and so that happened in a couple of areas where the game was just crashing all over the place. There was even some janky quests here and there where the waypoints weren't really lining up, and so there is a lot of rough around the edges nature here to some pretty great ideas. And what it left me feeling was, hey, this is a unique enough idea and concept for a game and a world space that tries enough new things where it is worth your time and attention. There are some typical open world beats you'll engage with, and I can't guarantee everyone will love it. But what I think this game really is a wait for a sale. It's something that you should not be paying full price for, not because it's bad, but because there's just too much rough around the edges with it. It needs a couple of patches. I think it's fun to dive into its world, but the combat at times really struggles, desperately needing that lock-on, which, by the way, the combat's a big focus of this game. I thought the progression was solid, but the choices were really hit or miss, and the way the game was paced out, it just felt very all over the place. But for a team of 20, I need to say this again, they've done a really good job. You may be confused, like, why are you saying they've done a good job, yet you're not really fully recommending the game? It's because you can acknowledge when something's good and it's there, but it's not good enough where I can sit there and be like, $60, put it on the table, go buy this game. Like, there is a lot of questions that are called into place, and it's not so assuredly good that I'd say, yeah, you're safe, go buy it. This is a wait for a sale, I have to say. So that's my overall verdict on BioMutant, a game that is going to be talked about a lot. Definitely going to be a hidden gem throughout the year. So I will say this with emphasis. Do not let it pass you up. Keep an eye out for it. And when it's on a sale for about $35, $30, $40 tops, if you're really curious, yeah, dive in there, because then I think you're going to get something more equal to that price tag. But right now it's $60. I think it's a little too much to be asking for with too many issues attached to it. So ultimately, that's my review of BioMutant. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts on this in the comments down below. I'm not sure how everyone's going to feel about it. I know my audience was excited. I know a couple creators playing it who were like it's a very middling title in a very strange way, because it's not bad. It's not boring. It just does a lot of things, and not all of them super well. So I leave it in your hands now. What do you think of my verdict? Let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. Big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.